Hello there, my friends, and welcome back. We are returning to our regularly scheduled programming today. Going back to the good, the bad, and the Bible, the show where we talk about, well, exactly what the title says, the good and the bad in the Bible. Doesn't get much more basic than that. There was a time when the Bible was illegal to own in the common language. Only the priests, the Catholic priests, were allowed to have this. And it was in Latin. And they eventually made it legal for everyone to read and understand. And, well, people like to take it all kinds of different ways. My parents taught me to take it quite literally, for the most part. And, well, because that's how they taught me and they raised me to do, that's what I did. Until I found out that living by this book is not really the best way to live. You really have to cherry pick. You can't live by everything in this book and be a good person. You just can't. So, we are taking a logical, everyday man perspective of the Bible, just walking through it and seeing what makes sense and is worth paying attention to, what advice is actually good, and what of it is bad, and what should be completely ignored. And today we are in the book of Leviticus, the third book in the Bible. And don't worry, we're not going at a snail's pace. We're blasting through the first 6 chapters because they're that fucking boring. So, without any further ado, my name is Rogan, and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in the Bowler. Let's begin. Leviticus chapter 1. So right out the gate, I said it was going to be boring. Well, there's a shit ton of sacrifices and details as to how to give them. And when you sit down and read through it all, it's repetitive, it's boring, and especially in the King James original, King James version, which is what I was raised on reading, it is bland as fuck. But there were some things that I did find of interest along the way that I want to point out. You probably don't remember this, but way back in the book of Genesis, when Noah offered a burnt offering up to the Lord, and after the flood was over and God did the rainbow and all that, it specifically says that the sacrifice that Noah made was as a sweet smell in the nose of God. And I thought that was interesting and worth bringing up because in the first 6 chapters of Leviticus, and going through all these different kinds of sacrifices, there's burnt offering, there's meat offerings, there's different kinds of animals that are allowed to be sacrificed for different types of sins or voluntary offerings and such, over and over these details. But it says 9 times within the first 6 chapters that, specifically in regards to meat being offered and burnt and sacrificed to God, it says it's a sweet smelling savor to God. And I find it interesting because God thinks it just smells so fantastic, but later on he puts all this away, supposedly. When Jesus comes down and lives a perfect life and fulfills the law, all of this is suddenly not worth going through anymore. It's not applicable to the modern day Christian. And most Christians believe that. Very few of them actually will follow the things in the Old Testament. The ones that do are obviously a bit off the rocker, a bit more. And my parents gravitated that direction, but fortunately they weren't all the way into that. My dad really thought about, considered becoming an Amish. That was about as close as he got to getting really extreme with his views. But why would God put so much detail into all these sacrifices and such, and bother to mention how good it smells when these are sacrificed to him? But then later on he just gets rid of it entirely. Like, what? Why would he tell? Well, okay, he never technically tells anyone to ever stop doing these sacrifices. Technically. If you go by what Christians claim, with Jesus fulfilling the law and all that shit, Jesus, his word is good enough for them. But Yahweh himself, he doesn't say to stop doing these sacrifices. And they smell good to him, so I don't know why he would bother to tell his followers to stop doing it if he enjoys it so much. And then something else I found rather interesting about some of the differences in the sacrifices that they mentioned here. But we're just going to look at 3 and notice we'll just see if you find anything a bit unusual about these sacrifices. The first one, it mentions if the priest is anointed to do sin. This is chapter 4, verse 3. If the priest that is anointed to do sin according to, if he's, fuck it, I'm just going to summarize it. If a priest sins, he has to he has to sacrifice what they call here a young bullock. So I believe that is like a young male calf. A young bullock without blemish, that means without any defects. It's not sick, it doesn't have birth defects or anything like that. It is completely healthy, and it's young, and that's part of it. And it's male. That's sometimes it goes back and forth, but that bit doesn't matter as much. Although I'm sure there's interesting reasons people love to argue about all that shit. But that's not the point. The point is, the priest sins, and you have to sacrifice this young calf. Okay, to cover the sin. Okay, that's one sacrifice. Then we have a sin offering for the congregation. And it says in 13 and 14, if the whole congregation of Israel sins through ignorance, that's another subject I'll jump into in a second, which is kind of funny. But if the whole congregation of Israel sins, and if once they realize that they have sinned, and they realize it, and they decide to sacrifice it, what do? For the entire nation of Israel, it says they shall offer a young bullock for the sin. So the exact same thing for the entire nation. One bullock to cover the entire nation. Okay? And then, what about the common man? Well, it says in verse 27, if any one of the common people sin through ignorance, while he doeth it, and so on and so forth, and it says he shall bring his offering a kid of the goats. That means a baby goat, a female without blemish, for his sin which he hath sinned. So one animal. You see what this is here? It's one animal per each. That's what I'm going for here. But what is strange here, I find, is that the individuals have to sacrifice for themselves. But you can also do just one sacrifice for the entire nation with just one animal. It kind of makes the other offerings, well, the other sacrifices, seem kind of pointless to remove sin if you can just kill one animal and have the sin of all of an entire nation be forgiven. That seems to me what would make sense, instead of every individual every time they sin. Because I mean, come on, how many times do people sin a day according to, if you go by the standards of the Bible? People lie a lot. People don't murder, but people, if you go by Jesus' standard, people commit adultery in their heads every time they watch porn. Bullshit. It's imagination. And so, and coveting other people's items or wives or and such. So people sin a lot. And if they're going to be honest with themselves, they would be sacrificing animals every single day. It just seems to make a lot more sense to me to let the animals remain being used by the people for what they need them for, as opposed to using them for sin offerings, if you can just use one animal to cover the sins for the entire nation all at once. Is it... I mean, I'm not good at math, but one animal covering the sin of a whole nation versus one animal per person for the entire nation every time every person sins. It just seems like a lot of work. And there's so many details of, like, okay, if so and so does this kind of sin, they have to bring it in, and the priest has to cut up the animal this way and wash out this part and lay the fat and the kidneys and these other parts on the altar in a certain order. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, why does it have to be so complicated when you straight up say one bullock for the entire nation does the job? It's a lot of overkill. Literally overkill. And then there's this small aspect which I never came across before. I found it quite amusing. I briefly mentioned it, but there's this little section of sin offerings about all about different people sinning without knowing. Specifically, how does it say it? Sin through ignorance, or Yes, sin through ignorance. That is what it says every time. If so and so sins through ignorance, meaning if they commit a sin and they don't know it. Which honestly seems rather ridiculous because there is a verse, and I will have the reference posted on the screen, but it says that the Lord has written the law on the hearts of the people, or something like that. And Christians like to use this to say that uh, this is evidence of where we get our morals from, that we got them from God, that God um, gave us the natural desire of right and wrong to automatically know, which is bullshit. Not true at all whatsoever. If it was really that important to God for everyone to know exactly how to not sin against Him, then everyone would know the Ten Commandments without ever having to memorize them. Because written on the heart and all that shit, yes, there should be something very clear to where, I don't know where, I don't know why, but I feel like I should never kill anyone or lie. I feel like I should follow this particular religion on the Sabbath. Or I don't even know what the Sabbath is. I just know it's the sixth day of every week. It should be that automatic. Everyone should automatically know that if God really did write His law on everyone's hearts. And this right here seems quite for that point. Because over and over again, it talks about the priest sinning in ignorance. If it talks about common people sinning through ignorance, the entire nation sinning through ignorance. It goes through and talks about the rulers doing somewhat through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord. That's how it says it. All this sinning through ignorance. It seems like God is not very good at, like, why does God have to make these rules for sinning through ignorance? Like, why can't He just be understanding, be like, oh, I realize you didn't know. That's not your fault that you didn't know. No one told you. Now you found out. I'll let it go. Why can't God do that? It's like, oh, well, now you know. Well, now you've got to pay me. Like, we already have that with the government, okay? You park somewhere, you didn't know you weren't supposed to park there. Then you get a ticket, you have to pay the ticket, even though you didn't know you weren't supposed to park there. Tough shit. It sucks. Sometimes you get lucky and you get off. But not God. If you sin ignorantly, oh, you've got to find this specific animal and you've got to kill it. You make sure it's okay. Don't use any of the shitty animals for sacrificing to me. It better be good quality. And that's another thing. That's a dick move for God. Because what is God going to do with a perfectly healthy dead animal? The humans could make a far better use of that animal. And the uh, the sickly animal, the one that's going to die anyways, the one that is not good for much to the family, it seems like why couldn't God be like, hey, I know you could use this type of animal for something, but just sacrifice it to me when you sin, because it won't be as because I'm a merciful God. And I don't, I care about you. I want you to be able to take care of yourself. And so, when you sin, just, sacrifice one of your lesser animals to me. And save the best ones for yourself, because I know you need it to be able to survive. Because I'm not going to do every fucking thing for you. Why couldn't God be like that? That would make so much more sense. If He were a truly loving and understanding and compassionate God. Like, why can't he work in favor of them? Why do we have to give... Why does he deserve the best of everything if he's trying to help us out all the time? He wants the best, he wants the praise, he wants the worship, he wants his dick sucked. Okay, that part's not in the Bible, but it may as well be. Christians would do it if we asked. But we don't have a lot of positive aspects on this show about the Bible. But today we actually do. And I'm going to finish out with this one little thing that I found rather positive. And it's not any of the sacrifices themselves. I am not for the sacrifices of any of these. If God really knew how to forgive people, he wouldn't need blood to be able to forgive. He's an asshole. Humans don't need blood to forgive each other. Some of them are assholes and demand it, or they demand money or other things. Sometimes we need to pay what we owe to each other. But we are completely capable of forgiving without demanding blood sacrifices from each other and death. I don't approve of any of that. But I found this one little passage in chapter 6. And let's see if you can figure out what it's saying before I explain it, which I'll do after I read it. It's only like 4 verses. But it's old King James, so hang on to your hats. If a soul sin and commit a trespass against the Lord and lie unto his neighbor in that which was delivered him to keep, or in fellowship, or in a thing taken away by violence, or hath deceived his neighbor, or have found that which was lost, and lieth concerning it, and sweareth falsely, in any of all these that a man doeth, sinning therein, then it shall be, because he hath sinned and is guilty, that he shall restore that which he took violently away, or the thing which he hath deceitfully gotten, or that which was delivered him to keep, or the lost thing which he found. All or that about which he hath sworn falsely, he shall even restore it in the principal, and shall add the 5th part more thereunto, and give it unto him to whom it appertaineth. You understand what that meant? I'll simplify it for you. Basically what it's saying, if you trick someone, if you somehow trick them out of something into giving you something that isn't rightfully yours, or you find something that doesn't belong to you and you lie about you not knowing where it is because you want to keep it, or something along those lines. You lie, you manipulate wrongfully to acquire possessions of some nature wrongfully, and you are found out. The punishment is that you have to return what you wrongfully acquired, and you have to pay back 1/5's worth. I have to say, this is a pretty good idea. In previous laws that were written in Exodus, it talked about stealing, and it was another good law that I really liked, where if you stole from someone and they were caught, the thief had to pay back, I believe it was 3 times worth what they stole. So this is kind of the same deal, but significantly of a smaller amount. And honestly, I think if the law included that kind of punishment in today's society, people would be a lot less encouraged to steal and try and manipulate shit from each other. I mean, imagine if a scammer got caught and they had to, well, like in this case, they'd have to pay back everything to the person they scammed plus 1/5's worth more. I mean, they better work pretty hard to not get caught. And same for thievery. If the law were that if you get caught stealing, you have to pay back 3 times what you owe, or what you stole, people are going to be less willing to steal. But I don't write the rules, and I'm certainly in no position to run for a position to be able to do that. But that is just my humble opinion on the matter. And the Bible's opinion on all kinds of different things. I don't recommend following any of the sacrifices. They are no longer necessary, even by Christian standards. Of course, certain people who only follow the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, will disagree. Some people still follow, well, a more modernized version of the Old Testament laws. I feel sorry for them. It's a very controlling, manipulative belief system. And I'm glad I don't live in it. And I'm glad I don't live in the Christian version of it either. Because it was not fun. And I don't recommend anyone to ever go to church for answers in life. Because you will not find the right ones. Definitely stay away from this book. Unless you're taking a very logical and skeptical mindset about it. That is all for today. Come back next week and we will continue on through the book. I have no idea what's coming up, but we will see when we get there. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Stay safe, and until next time, my friends, farewell.